Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Bruce Lee is an iconic figure in Seattle lore. Before he became LA's kung fu teacher to the stars, he was an 18-year-old working at Ruby Chow's restaurant on the corner of Broadway and Jefferson, attending the University of Washington and getting in fights at Dick's Drive-In. In a minute, we'll hear more about a new stage show that outlines this formative part of his life. But first, let's get you caught up. Seattle's gold medal-winning hockey players are coming back home. The Seattle Torrent are hosting a celebratory press conference at the Space Needle this afternoon to honor Hillary Knight, Alex Carpenter, Hannah Bilka, and Kayla Barnes, who helped Team USA take gold in a thrilling overtime win over Canada last week. Today's events will also be streamed live on the Torrent's YouTube page. The Torrent will play their first post-Olympics game against Toronto Friday night at 7 at Climate Pledge Arena. State Democrats rejected Governor Bob Ferguson's plan to borrow $1 billion to build new hybrid electric ferries to shore up the state's aging fleet. This week, the House and Senate announced their transportation spending plans. Ferguson had been pushing to borrow $1 billion against future gas tax revenue to buy 3 new ferries. The Washington State Standard reports budget writers agree with the goal of building new ferries, but aren't ready to commit about how to pay for them. The proposed budgets would also pause spending on converting diesel ferries to run on electricity. And Microsoft employees are settling into the new 3 days in office mandate. Microsoft President Brad Smith says there are no plans to require the company's entire workforce to return to the office 5 days a week. Smith told the Puget Sound Business Journal that individual units at Microsoft can increase the requirement if they choose, but there's no additional company-wide change in the works. Seattle-based Amazon began requiring its workers to return to the office 5 days a week starting last year. We're back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. A new play at Seattle Children's Theater tells the story of Bruce Lee's time in Seattle. He arrived in 1959 and would only stay 5 years, but they would be some of his most formative. Lee spent time at the University of Washington, where he would teach his first kung fu classes and meet his wife, Linda Lee Caldwell. Young Dragon, a Bruce Lee story, captures a young man finding his way and learning what would eventually become the iconic philosophy that he's known for.
Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Playwright Keiko Green is here to talk about writing Young Dragon and how it resonates today. Keiko, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So what inspired you to write Young Dragon?
Young Dragon was a co-commission from the Seattle Children's Theater and the Kennedy Center. Originally, they had a few years back a play called The Boy Who Kissed the Sky, which was an original world premiere play about Jimi Hendrix's time in Seattle. So I think that kind of made them wonder what other figures who are important in history and in pop culture had spent a significant time here in Seattle. And Bruce Lee, he arrived here. It's not as glamorous a time in his life, but it really, Seattle's a huge part of how he became the iconic figure that he became. And he, he's buried here, and his son Brandon is buried here. So there was a lot in there that felt worth exploring for me.
In the intro, I mentioned that this story is really about a young man finding his way, but what makes Bruce Lee such an interesting subject for storytelling?
Yeah, I think that for myself growing up, I always looked at Bruce Lee as this kind of untouchable, almost godlike figure. And what was really interesting was when this project first came up to me, I sort of started doing a little deep dive, and I was really actually drawn into how all of these philosophical ideas that we now define him by, this like Zen-like state or be like water, which is actually a huge part of our play, how those things actually did not come naturally to him. He was a hothead. He had to learn how to become Zen because he was getting into fights. And even when he figured out how to navigate those emotional outbursts, it wasn't all the time and it wasn't every day. And there was something about that felt so deeply human, and also a story that was really worth telling for young people.
Yeah, I want to mention this is specifically for young people. So what is instructive about Bruce Lee's time here in this play for a young audience?
Bruce Lee's time in Seattle isn't as glamorous as his time in Hollywood. He's been basically thrown out of Hong Kong, banished is how we word it in the play. He really has something to prove. He has a chip on his shoulder. He has these big dreams, and they seem impossible to achieve. And I think what's so great about his time in Seattle, especially, is really figuring out what it was about Seattle that was able to help him figure out that new path. You know, he came to the U.S. He was an outsider. He was learning about racism, and his first student was a Black American here in Seattle, and he almost wasn't allowed to learn Kung Fu because he wasn't 100% Chinese heritage. And so he is taking these huge leaps to start making Kung Fu available to everybody. He thinks everybody should be able to learn to defend himself, and there's something about this point in his life where he's making these, really ahead of his time ideas and decisions about how he wants to lead his life that I found just deeply inspiring.
There's so much in what you just said. Let's break it out a little bit because, right, Bruce Lee was already making movies by the time he moved to Seattle as an 18-year-old. And that first student is interesting because a Black man in Seattle at that time wanted to learn something specific from Bruce Lee. So let's talk about that.
So we had Shannon Lee, Bruce Lee's daughter, available to us through the writing process, which was really amazing. One of the first things I got to do is chat with her. And she also came to our performances last week as we opened. And something that she even mentioned recently was just, Bruce Lee grew up in the arts. His dad was a Chinese opera star. And yes, he was a child star in these movies in Hong Kong. He really did lose that after getting into a lot of trouble over there in Hong Kong, and suddenly he's here in Seattle and he's a dishwasher and the restaurant stuck in the kitchen. What a fall that must have felt like. And so as he's really trying to build himself back up, he finds this incredible friendship with Jesse Glover, who is his first student here in the U.S. And Jesse Glover is a Black man, and he first learned judo before becoming one of Bruce Lee's students. But he first learned judo because he had been the victim of police brutality, and he was mistaken for another person and decided one day that he just needed to learn how to defend himself in the future. And that's Bruce Lee's origin story as a teacher and an instructor. I'd heard of Jesse Glover before, but I had never really heard the intricacies of that story. And it's really kind of shocking also how important that story is to tell today, and unfortunately how present it still feels. And also I'm happy to kind of share that with young people. I know it can be a big theme, but it seems like a really important aspect of Bruce's life, of his inclusivity, now more than ever.
Yeah, let's talk about maybe some of the other things about his life that were formidable and formed who he became in those 5 years that he was here.
There are some great Seattle historical moments in the play and locations. We have Ruby Chow's restaurant. Ruby Chow, who was a humongous historical figure here in Seattle. We've had her descendants coming to the show. Her son, actually, he came up to me. He's like, is my mother a protagonist or an antagonist? And I said, well, she's a little bit of both. But she's a strong woman who had a huge impact on the city. And of course, Bruce Lee's time in Seattle also includes his meeting of Linda, who became his wife and the mother of his children. They had their first date here at the Space Needle, which is just a really sweet sequence. And Linda actually got to come see the show too. And she looked out into the audience. She said, "That really happened." I was just so glad. She actually didn't know she was a character in the play. So
wow.
It was a lot of pressure for me.
We chatted at the top here about how this was a co-commission from the Seattle Children's Theater and the Kennedy Center. The show was originally slated to run at the Kennedy Center, but last month Seattle Children's Theater announced it was pulling out of those shows. How did everyone come to this decision?
Yeah, the original commission was in, I think, I want to say March 2024. Even since then, which doesn't seem like that long ago, a lot has happened, especially politically. And, there was a part of me that was a little bit surprised when the Kennedy Center continued with the programming, actually. I'm originally from the South, and I saw very little Asian American representation on stage. So there was a part of me that, for a really, really long time, trying to push to say, I don't think that it's worth pulling this show out and taking away an opportunity to potential young people in DC that would get to see the show. I think that once the name change happened, as the Kennedy Center was really being steered into an obviously different direction, there was the point where all of the people that I was in touch with at the Kennedy Center who were giving me notes on the show no longer worked there anymore. Suddenly, we didn't really know what we were walking into. I think that was something that was really top of mind for myself and the director as we were really voicing to the Children's Theater that we thought it was probably the best idea to pull out. But ultimately, it was their choice. What I really commend the Children's Theater for is they talk to the actors, they talk to all of their own staff, they talk to the Kennedy Center staff. They made a decision really based on speaking to as many people as humanly possible. I think once Shannon Lee and the Bruce Lee Foundation also recommended pulling out of the show, it became kind of a no-brainer. It's been, an unfortunate situation. Me personally, I'm not saying no to the Kennedy Center forever. I'm just saying not right now, not at that exact location. It's just not the right time.
Young Dragon is already running at Seattle Children's Theater. What have you heard about the show? How has the audience responded? What have you noticed?
Yeah, we've had amazing audiences already. Our first two previews were student shows, and it was our first time having an audience, and it was also the first time we were getting to perform it in front of kids, which was wild. And my goal is really for people to be leaving just super jazzed about Kung Fu and Bruce Lee, and we've already been seeing that. We've also had some really great audience members who are, childless adults who are coming because they love Bruce Lee, because they want to support us. And something that I've loved is just hearing that, I thought this was going to be just for kids, and it's actually for everybody. And my mother, who has already seen the show multiple times, she was saying that in the audience, she was seeing a lot of grandparents with grandkids, parents with children, and the intergenerational aspect of the audience has been to be able to create an event where people can have experiences like that together is the absolute dream for me.
The recommendation for the age is 8+ on the show. How were you thinking about that when you were actually writing?
Yeah, so I think that the 8+ age group is really wonderful. I also come from a family where my mom is from Japan. English is her second language. So there's a lot of my writing that I already kind of want to gear towards people who might not be picking up on language constantly. It just means that you have to make sure that the show is visually interesting, that the storytelling can happen even if you miss a couple words here and there, which actually just makes the show extremely inclusive. And in a way, I've been practicing for it all my life, and so it's been kind of a blessing to be able to approach a work in that way.
The young actor playing Bruce Lee has some pretty big shoes to fill. What's that like for him?
Yes, we had a really hard time casting for Bruce Lee, as you can imagine. I mean, when you're depicting excellence on stage, you have to find someone that can really follow through with that. Our actor Michelangelo Hyun, he is an actor that I have already worked with before, and he is, I knew him, but it wasn't until we had trouble casting for a little while, even just for our workshops, that I had lunch with him, and suddenly, as I was staring at him over burritos, he went to the bathroom, and I texted the director, I think we found him. And that was just kind of based on, maybe we'll bring him in for a workshop. He'll be able to at least, he'll be able to act it well. What I didn't know was actually what a good fighter he is. He had, he came into the process already being able to somewhat use nunchucks. He had studied Kung Fu. And since then, his training, he's been studying under someone who studied under Bruce Lee. And he's bringing all of that expertise and passion. And the people are coming in, I think, a little bit folded arms. As the show the lights come up, they're like, yeah, let's see Bruce Lee. But I think everyone's walking away truly impressed by the feat. And it's not just the kung fu of it. Our play is 61 minutes long. It's a breeze, and he barely leaves the stage. It's basically a 1 hour gymnastics show for Michelangelo.
Certainly Bruce Lee's physicality is definitely a thing, and it's also immortalized on a stamp right now. He was just given a forever stamp in Seattle last week, a day before your show started its run. What does it mean to you that Bruce Lee's on a stamp? It's good co-branding.
It sure is, yeah. Yeah, and the governor announced it as Bruce Lee Week.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was it was very exciting to get to be a part of that whole experience. It's exciting. It also meant a lot of pressure. Even with the Kennedy Center announcement, suddenly there were a lot of eyes on us, which is so great, and I'm so grateful for that. And also it meant you better pull this thing off. So being able to be a part of that, have the Bruce Lee Foundation folks here, Shannon here, Linda here, everyone here to kind of celebrate that week together is truly an experience I won't forget.
You mentioned the pressure of writing this play. Before I let you go, what does Be Like Water mean to you?
As a writer, Be Like Water, I think is something I really will carry with me. The idea is basically when you find an obstacle, instead of just hitting it head on with all the rage and fire that you can, instead maybe the more efficient way around it is to find the nooks and crannies, find the other pathways around. I think that writers are often sitting in front of their laptop, staring at a blank page, thinking, write something. But actually, it's through letting yourself relax, finding your own little rituals to get yourself into that mind space. And sometimes the best way to write is to go walk your dog and just let your brain wander and think and stop actually putting so much pressure on yourself to be perfect. Let something instead just come out more stream of consciousness, and you can always revise it later. And to me, Be Like Water, that's the writing philosophy that I'll probably take with me.
Oh, a little more like water.
Yeah.
KUOW Green, really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
KUOW Green is the playwright behind Young Dragon, a Bruce Lee story. You can see it at Seattle Children's Theater until March 29th. Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now, and thanks to our generous donors for your financial support. Take a minute to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode was produced by Vaughn Jones. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tonight for Evening Headlines.